So what I call lumpy, that's my playful name for this lump on the side of my neck. When lumpy showed up, it caused me to confront a lot of what I had valued about myself, and all of the emotions that came up with that. And like I said, approached alternative therapies. But again, I approached those from like, I got to get rid of this. I need to fix this, get this fucker out of here kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course they didn't work, because what was underneath all of those, the fasting and all of the keto, just all of those all the supplements,
Yeah.
let me tell you.
We are on. Welcome back to the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for being here and listening to my guests, the interviews. It really means a lot to me. If you're new here, this is an interview-based podcast where you'll find a wide range of topics and guests, such as doctors, sex workers, former sex workers, women who escape cults, scientists, psychotherapists, coaches, divorce lawyers, and so many more. So when the podcast series is live, I publish every other Monday. So you'll have the next episode in 2 weeks on a Monday. This series should go on till the end of October. I'm going to try my best not to have longer pauses, but sometimes I have to, simply because I am in a full-time work. I've been back in full-time work for almost 3 years now. Before, I used to be part-time, and there was even a time where I, was unemployed. So all of that makes a difference in terms of how many episodes I can put on continuously. But I'm really, really excited to be back for this series. Today's episode is with the returning guest, Colette Davenport. She was on the show. Her episode was released in April 2020. And I definitely recommend you go and listen to her after you've listened to this one. It's episode 34. And it is called Chat with a Former Call Girl, Soul Wound, Sex, and Getting Off for Empath. So it's a lot of things have happened in between. So today we talk about how self-love falls short for people who don't like what they see in the mirror. And that was the main idea of the episode for today. But actually, it's actually deeper than that. It's a lot deeper than that. It's not just about what you see in the mirror. It's about how you see the world and how you move through the world. And I really, really enjoyed this episode. And I have a little gift for you. I created a guide to help you integrate the profound insights from this episode with Colette into your own life. To download this exclusive PDF recap that contains the 4-step protocol, understanding soul wounds, metaphysical insights, practical tips and exercises. As you see, we went way beyond what we originally had set out to do for this interview, right? Is way more than just looking in the mirror. So to get that PDF, please check the show notes where it says download this episode's handy guide here. So without further ado, please help me give a big, warm welcome to Colette. Let's begin. Welcome back, Colette. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you back on. When we last recorded this podcast, it was in early 2020. And it was episode 34, which was called Chat with a Former Call Girl, Soul Wound, Sex, and Getting Off for Empath. Because you're an empath, I'm an empath. And so that was an incredible episode. And I really loved it. And I always remembered you in my head. And I've always wanted to have you back. So I'm really happy that today we can do this. So I'm really grateful to have you back on to talk about how self-love falls short for people who don't like what they see in the mirror. And maybe we can also include like what they don't like to see in photographs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because to me, that's the worst. So before we dive in, Colette, big welcome. And please reintroduce yourself for those who may not know you, where you live and what you do.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Angie. I am super stoked to be here, having another conversation with you. The first one that we had was very deep and intimate, um, and I can only imagine how fun this one's going to be as well. So, thank you for having me back. I am Colette Davenport. I am a metaphysicist and I've been a coach for over a decade. I've written a book for empaths all about emotional mastery. I have worked primarily with empathic people, those that are highly sensitive. And in fact, I'm changing that phrase from highly sensitive to highly perceptive. We're not sensitive, we're perceptive. And so we take in a lot of information. And my body of work oftentimes is focused on being able to navigate the complexities of all that information emotionally, but even more so at a deeper level, at a soul level, if you will. That's where the basis of my body of work is today, because everything's an evolution, right? So I'm
Yes.
sure we're going to get into what I've been up to in these last 4 years since we spoke. I'm super excited to share it with you and this audience.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love this. It's, that all resonates what you said about like, highly sensitive because apparently I'm HSPA, which is a highly sensitive extrovert person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but when you said highly perceptive, that just really like hit me because often this high sensitivity, like is it can almost sometimes feel like you are just on the verge of a little bit of paranoia because you can see, like, it's almost like your brain sense things. You can see like it's like a look in the eye, like a little facial muscle that's not necessarily noticed by others, but you see and you can sense something is not right, but you can't exactly address it because depending on the situation, it's just there's a lot of stuff coming in, um and so that's definitely a very important area to have people who can actually help us to navigate that. Because for years I remember thinking, well, is it me or is it them? Am I making this up in my head? Do you know what I mean? Like you just,
Right.
and it can sense like, and you don't want to talk about it because you're like, they're going to think I'm crazy or paranoid because of, so yeah. And then you sort of learn to manage and yeah. I don't know if that's something that you do too, but just have things like almost just to help like shield yourself from others' energies and trying to
Yeah. Yeah.
discern.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that even more when we get into what I do when I work with people, but I have early on just in this process of self-discovery and self-mastery, early on I was also taught these like protection mechanisms like the bubble of white light and things of
Yes.
this nature to keep all of that energy out. But here's the thing that I've evolved to. We actually don't need to protect ourselves. We need to know ourselves and master our unique skills and abilities and then honor them, not mask them, not protect ourselves from this world and its, positivity, negativity, this, that, and the other. We actually need to be discerning about how we roll, how we show up in the world, environments that we're in, relationships that we're in, and just be more masterful, not protecting ourselves from this world. Because, I mean, we can sit in the seat of victim, protecting ourselves and seeing the world as the source or the cause of our lack of confidence, lack of self-love, or any other issue that we might be facing. We can do that,
Yes. Yeah.
but I'm a steadfast proponent for those of us that were born with this sort of extrasensory perception, if you will, which is often called high sensitivity and HSP, right? And shifting that into a power position that you even notice when I said the words, like we're not highly sensitive. That makes us, that's sort of victimizing. We're highly perceptive. That has more power in it, just in that one shift in the language that we use to describe this ability or this gift that we were born with. So it's not about protection. I mean, again, there's all kinds of tips, tools, and techniques out there that will teach that. And maybe that's a stage on the way, but at some point we wake all the way up and realize that living this world in a white bubble of white light ain't fun. and remaining sort of victimized and cut off from the incredibleness that this world has to offer just is not a fun way to live. So,
Yeah, I love the highly perceptive. I'm going to use that going forward. So
cool.
it's like a
Go for
superpower.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, and we'll gotta get into all of that. I think that's really good, and I want to ask you about the soul levels too as well. That, but maybe like just before we go into like all the self love, and how to master our high perception, down to not just emotionally but at a soul level as well. Like, do you want to tell us a bit about what you've been doing since we last spoke in April 2020? Actually, it was even before
Yeah.
April we spoke. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So the metaphysical technology that I have termed the pause protocol, pause spelled PAZ, is the Latin word for peace. So it's a peace generating, if you will, technology. And generating is not quite the right word, because we are at our core, at our soul, is peaceful. That's its essence, or that's our natural state. It's covered up by a bunch of shit and a bunch of chaos and a bunch of conditioning and a bunch of worries and a bunch of thoughts and a bunch of feelings and all of these things that we are very really, like, it's very real experiences that we're having. But if we strip each of those away, if we go investigating all of that, what we wind up with, Angie, is the essence of who we are, which is fundamentally peaceful. So the pause protocol is something that I've developed and was using for a number of years in my coaching practice, but I've distilled it, I've refined it. I'm in the process of getting a PhD in metaphysical science. So
Wow.
the thing that it's a lot of fun because I'm wanting to bring more quantifiability, if that's a word, to this divine technology that I have channeled. Because it's one thing to sort of know something for yourself. It's a whole other thing to be able to replicate it, teach it, and have others use it.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge that I wanted to overcome, if you will. And so the last 4 years, that's what I've been doing, is refining and distilling and quantifying. In fact, the pause protocol is it's a scientific process that incorporates metaphysical principles to achieve that immediate sense of inner peace, so that the acute stress that we're feeling, so that immediate that we might be experiencing, we can release. And then also that chronic emotional suffering that highly perceptive people, and not just people like us, all the high-powered people, right, aren't necessarily high perceptivity, but people in positions that have great responsibility and tons of pressure. These are the clients that I'm working with more so these days. They're CEOs, they're founders of organizations and leaders of organizations, and they've got a lot on their plate and a lot of pressure. And so they're not necessarily highly sensitive people, but they have a high responsibility. And so the pause protocol is something that can help them rapidly and reliably get grounded. Because what I'm really interested in is seeing people in positions of power, in leadership, right? The people in charge. Yeah. I'm really interested in seeing the people in charge that are running, organizations, governments, et cetera. I'm really interested in seeing them have a deep sense of groundedness, of inner peace, because that then impacts everything they do. Okay, yes. So there's a natural, organic, domino effect, if you will, ripple effect, that every life they touch will be positively impacted when they themselves have a deep sense of inner peace that cannot be achieved through our typical approach of achievement, right? Like hard work, hustle, all of this wonderful get shit done type of activities. if done without a sense of deep knowing around who self is, who I am is, the self-love thing that we were about to talk more about,
Yeah.
without that, all of that success is just, it's just ego driven, and it will eventually crumble. And if you look around, a lot of the systems that we live within, our financial systems, political systems, healthcare systems, et cetera, are crumbling.
Yeah. What do you understand by metaphysical? Like, what's the definition? Because, I mean, do you know what I mean? What does that actually really mean by metaphysical?
Yeah, great question. So you're probably familiar with Newtonian physics, right? This is an old school philosophical theory of our reality as we know it. And then we've evolved, if you will, in our understanding of our world, our universe, that which we exist within. And so quantum physics is now, we're all pretty familiar with quantum physics, which says that even the smallest particles of matter aren't actually solid. They aren't actually physical. They are energetic, or the proton, the photons, the waves and the particles. And so without our observation, they remain in this sort of energetic state. But with observation, you've probably heard of the double slit experiment, where the two particles, and so it was based on the observation of that. And also, I think the other thing in quantum physics is when the atom is split and then the change is made to half of it, the other half also demonstrates that change, like on some other part of the planet, kind of thing. So that shows us that we're all connected and that we aren't all physical the way that we perceive ourselves to be, which is the foundation of Newtonian physics. So Newtonian physics was our early understanding. Then we came to understand quantum physics. So metaphysics is sort of this next evolution of our understanding of ourselves. And metaphysics has been around. So you might even think of the mystical teachings of people like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna, all of these ancient spiritual traditions, all of that wisdom is encapsulated, if you will. It's the same thing as what I'm talking about in terms of metaphysics. So the word meta means beyond, and physics, right? So we're going beyond that which is measurable. Okay, so metaphysics is the study of reality beyond which the measurements can be known. And we can only know measurements of our physical world through physics with our five senses. So what we see, what we taste, what we hear, you get it, right? So our five senses measure our known reality. These are the measurement apparatuses, I don't know, whatever. That's how we measure our reality, with our five senses. So metaphysics goes beyond the five senses, and it helps us to understand what exists, if you will, beyond our ability to see it, taste it, hear it, touch it, etc. So we're dipping our toe in the spiritual realm, okay, in the mystical realm.
Would that be like intuition would be part of metaphysics? Like, you can't see, touch, or you can't quantify it in the way that we would normally with our five senses.
Correct.
But you just have a sense, that phone call is going to be good or bad, or like the cat well, maybe that's different, because I think cat, they can probably see things we can't see. So that's maybe different when they like zoom around the room and stuff. But
yes, to answer your question, intuition would fall into the realm of a metaphysical phenomenon. And it's a knowing, right? What is intuition? It's a knowing. It's a sense of knowing without the evidence to indicate this knowing.
Yeah, when you just said this inner knowing, I was thinking because obviously intuition is the inner teacher. That's what it means. Intuition is your inner, okay. Is this do you have a particular reason? I love everything that you said, and I love what you do, and I feel like this is really important work. Was there a particular moment that got you to do this? Because I know we talked about metaphysics and peace, but I know I I guess we haven't spoken about self-love just yet, so maybe my question is premature, but I was wondering, like,
Yeah.
what is it that has got you to want to help others with the
Yeah.
past protocol?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Um, I would say it goes all the way back to 2008. Or you know what, probably even from the time I was a child. So even prior to 2008, right? But just having this sort of relentless sense to understand, right? I'm a philosopher. I'm a born philosopher. I just have this like immense curiosity about how things work, why things are, and things of that nature. But like a lot of people, it's not like that childlike curiosity doesn't make for like lot of necessarily productivity and following like in college and getting a job and things of this nature. So it's something that sort of um, gets put on a back burner or just like tucked away in a box under the bed kind of thing, right? You got to grow up and get serious and shit like that. And
Yeah.
so like, and I'm also, and so I have this strong intuition and curiosity that has always propelled me, but I also have a keen intellect. And so I'm also very academic and I've got the right brain, left brain thing going on, like both.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
which sometimes can be like overwhelming because the two can often conflict with one another. But here I am, like, all right, I got to satisfy both my understanding and need to know intellectually, but also that intuitive curiosity leading me down places that make no logical fucking sense whatsoever. And so I just follow that path. And so in 2008, I had been living more along the lines of the intellect, right? Doing, checking all the boxes kind of thing. And that's when the brainstem tumor that I have here came on the scene, so to speak. And that sent me on an investigation into myself. So it started with all the physical alternative therapy to heal this, to make it go away. But I also had a lot of, you know, embarrassment. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of anger for this even being a part of my life. And so that all kind of called into question for me my sense of self-worth, what I saw in the mirror, right? I did not like what I saw in the mirror. Prior to this, much younger, like in my teenagers, like modeled. So I had a lot of value based in my physicality, the way that I look. And so what I call lumpy, that's my playful name for this lump on the side of my neck. When lumpy showed up, it caused me to confront a lot of what I had valued about myself, and all of the emotions that came up with that. And like I said, approached alternative therapies. But again, I approached those from like, I got to get rid of this. I need to fix this, get this fucker out of here kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course they didn't work because what was underneath all of those, the fasting and all of the keto, just all of those all the supplements.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
It's a rabbit hole. I still take supplements, but I used to really like everything that was out. It's like, let me try this. Like yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was sort of the early on years of this self-investigation, self-healing pursuit. And it didn't work, right? And so then I had to dig deeper, and I found my way investigating energy and emotions and the impact of those on the physical body and the perception of ourselves, right? So if I'm harboring shame, how is that impacting who and what I see when I look in the mirror and how I show up in the world, right? So then again, being this curious, intellectual and intuitive investigator, so to speak, that was a long and windy path. And so, yeah, what I finally ended up with was a sense of self-knowing once I, got to this place of, all right, lumpy can stay or go. I'm no longer fixated on fixing what's wrong, right? I got to this place of unconditional love for myself, including what we would consider to be a flaw. Okay, so I was able to arrive at that place through many years, but I've distilled that now into the pause protocol to help other people not take, a decade to find that sense of self-love, unconditional self-love and acceptance. And I genuinely got to the place. It can stay or it can go.
Yeah.
It's not me. It doesn't, like, who I am. Like, I could lose an arm, I could lose my teeth. Like, it doesn't, none of that would change who I ultimately am. It would change my appearance.
Yeah.
But if I'm placing my value on my appearance, well, that fucking thing's going to change regardless. It's called aging and all of these other things. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I got beyond that. And it sort of, my life became more spacious internally.
Yeah. Because that must have taken a lot of space, in your head and emotionally, energetically. That would have been very consuming.
Yeah. And always feeling like you got to fix something that's wrong with you is no way to live this life, right? That brings us all the way back to talking about sitting in the seat of victim, trying to protect ourselves with the bubble of white light or whatever it may be, protect ourselves from the world, others, or even our own perception of ourselves, right? What we see in the mirror. That's no way to live. It just isn't. It's confining, it's limiting, it's frustrating, it's depressing, just a whole bunch of stuff. So
yeah. Because I think that as we can be, highly perceptive, there's also a tendency to be highly reactive.
Yeah.
And
that's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so there is a line between understanding when actually your perception is correct and when maybe your perception is flawed by the lenses that you wear. So the example with that person on my team, that was flawed. That was basically colored by the lenses I was wearing. I was projecting onto her, assuming things that weren't there. And it was making me, it was rattling me. So I wasn't showing up in the way that I wanted to with that person, and it bothered me. So I called the coach, and so she helped me to see it in a different way. I did not expect what she was saying, but I was like, that was so useful because I think that there's a relief in knowing that you weren't actually right, in knowing that I wasn't right. We can. This is actually something that we can actually go back and carry on this work relationship. Don't have to like go, my friend, I spoke to a friend of mine and she's like, oh no, my God, yeah, no, get rid, that was the reaction, right?
Yeah.
And so who you listen to and who advice you take on.
Perfect. It's a perfect segue. What you're referring to is what I have coined your soul wound. The lens that you're referring to, it's your ego's fingerprint, right? It's as unique to you as your fingerprint, or it's as unique to your ego as your fingerprint. And the purpose of your ego is to find the problems and solve them to keep you safe, to keep you alive, right? That's the purpose of the ego if we look at it from a primal lens. But we're no longer running from saber-toothed tigers, where most people who are going to be watching this or listening to this podcast aren't looking for shelter to survive the night in, these kinds of things. So the ego has had to adapt. And so now it's looking for emotional threats. Okay. Yes, there are times where we need to physically react to a situation. Yes, of course. We're not talking about bodily harm here. We're talking about emotional reactivity. Okay. And so the ego will jump in and based on your unique soul wound. And again, it's the soul wound is this, it's totally unique to you, meaning yours is different than mine. There's general, like, not good enough, too sensitive, not smart enough. Like, those are generalizations, but that's the thing that I have found that's missing in the majority of spiritual pursuits, personal development, methodologies, things of this nature. No one has, girl, not even like ancient spiritual wisdom has talked about this. It's just like, I guess, my discovery. I don't know. But the soul wound is so specific and unique to you. And it's not even like, oh, you're dumb. That's too nice. It's fucking cruel. So just to give you an example of what I mean, my soul wound is I am, and every single one of them starts with the words I am. It is a fundamental identifying statement, again, that the ego believes is true and therefore is always trying to solve for. Okay. So if there's anything that confronts us in our environment, a person, a potential colleague says something that confronts or triggers your unique, specific, and cruel soul wound, you'll react. Okay, you'll defend yourself, you'll protect yourself, you'll project, you'll try to prove yourself right while proving them wrong, right? This is this apparatus of the soul wound, which is again, it's the ego's fundamental perspective on you and reality. So it's just part of being human. Every single one of us has one. It doesn't even matter if we had like the best childhood ever or like some traumatic shit happening. Every single one of us have a soul wound. It's just part of our human makeup. Okay. So my soul wound is I am an ugly, disgusting waste of time.
I remember you mentioned it last time about with the soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine how confronting this physical malady would be to that soul wound. In other words, I was triggered as shit for a real long time. So for my own sanity, my own well-being, my own inner peace, I actually had to create in this case, because I did all the meditation. I have a yoga teacher's training certificate or whatever. Like I worked with amazing coaches and teachers and spiritual guides and things of this nature. And every single one of them was helpful. But until I discovered and developed this technology around the soul wound specifically, right? Its specificity is the key to this. Then I continued to get triggered by my environment. My own body was confronting me with like, I couldn't avoid it, right? Every time I looked in the mirror, there I was triggered at my core, because where does the soul wound live? In the soul. But it's the apparatus that has us go from being this infinite, eternal, perfected, peaceful being to being human, looking to solve for that apparent separation from source. And I say apparent because it's not actual. It's appearing. We are appearing as separate. Again, this brings us back to Newtonian physics, right? Where our fundamental perception of reality is that we are physically solid. We're separate from one another and all of life. And we're fundamentally slow to change, right? It takes time to evolve. So that's the basis of Newtonian physics. Quantum physics gave us a little bit of relief and is like, actually, everything is connected. And we're not as solid as we think we are. And we can change on a dime. We can shift our perception like the coach helped you do. Shift your perception of what is, right? And now you can respond to what is differently and have a more copacetic outcome. So metaphysics then is all of that. It's perceiving what is as infinite. We are infinite. Life, the world, our imagination is infinite, and we're imaginal, not imagined, not some simulation, not real. Like we don't need to go in that direction. That's still our mind. That's still our ego making sense of what it can from a logical perspective. So I'm not saying we're not real and we don't exist, right? But what I am saying is we're imaginal. We are what we perceive ourselves to be.
Is that what you mean by imaginal? Is that we are what we perceive ourselves to be? Is that what you mean?
Correct. Correct. And therefore, so is our reality. In other words, if I perceive you as a threat, guess how you're going to show up to me as threatening.
That's our reputation. Okay. When they say reputation, how do you call it? When it comes before you,
precedes you,
precedes you. It's like, I mean, I see that at work all the time. Oh, that person's scary, and then all of a sudden you're already like on edge. Or if that person is lovely, you think that it really is.
Yeah.
Like our eyes, our brain is not a camera, it's a projector.
Yeah.
Whatever
Precisely.
you think you're going to see, it's funny because I actually had this exact conversation a little bit, well, similar conversation with someone who's an astrophysicist, and we talked about quantum entanglement, and we were talking about, I'm sure it was with Lindsay DeMarchi, and it's about, and she asked me a question, and I basically said, well, I can walk out of my house, I can go to work one day and think everything's shit. It's like, it's grey, it's London, there's no room, there's no green, there's the same old bus, there's a window tube, it's disgusting, like this. Or I can wake up and go, oh my God, it's actually a nice area. Look at that. There's a little cat that walks across and I can hear the birds in the morning. And it's still the same, it's the same place, but my reality has changed.
That's right.
And how my day is going to unfold is going to be different because I'm going to be more smiley and that person is going to receive me differently.
Yes.
And it's just like, it's like a snowball effect.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly right. And so from a metaphysical perspective of reality, right, we're talking about a paradigm, a fundamental perspective of reality in which we live and exist and all things do. So from a metaphysical perspective, reality then is infinite, imaginal, not imagined, imaginal. And I'm not going to get into what the difference is. If you want to go, like, if you're a word nerd like me, then you can go look up the words imaginal and imagined and see the difference for yourself. But it's infinite, it's imaginal, and it's here for the choosing. Okay. This world is here for the choosing. Out of these infinite possibilities, we are choosing which of this infinite imaginal reality that we live in, which perception, which perspective, which point of view we're going to have of this reality that we live in. Okay. So infinite, imaginal, and here for the choosing. We are here for the choosing, and the world, right? Reality is here for the choosing. So if we can look at it from that angle, girl, like, where's the power? It's all right here. It's not out there. But the power is out there. I'm a victim to this, the circumstance that I live in, this body that I live in, this world that I live in. Like, that's the outcome, if you will, for a lot of people in the traditional paradigm, the traditional view of reality. Right. And so my work is fundamentally, and this is where, again, I see a lot of, not all, I'm speaking very generally, but a lot of personal development and even spiritual pursuits still are placing this traditional view of reality, separate, solid, and slow to change, on themselves, but on the situation as well, right? So as long as we see God as something somewhere out there, not here, not I am, as long as we see God or source or universe, whatever language you want to use to describe that ultimate being, as long as we're perceiving that to be separate from us, we will be a victim. And that is where the ego comes in. That is what the ego needs. It needs to see separation. It needs to perceive that separation in order to be functional. Okay. So then we get to a lot of these spiritual traditions that talk about killing the ego. Well, I'm sorry, you actually can't do that. And why would you want to kill a part of your humanity? No, it's about understanding how the ego operates. So the pause protocol that I developed first helps us intellectually, right? Our mind wants to know. And the cool thing is, Angie, it's so simple. When our mind gets it, we go, oh, okay, now I understand why I react to that person that way, because of my unique soul wound. Okay. And so for some, I had this one client, I never met him in person, but he like shared with me, he's like, I am not as tall. I've always wanted to be taller. Okay. And I originally started working with him. I forget the exact circumstance. It's been a handful of years ago now, but it was, he wanted to marry his girlfriend, but had these real resistant around his height, living up to her expectations. Her ex-boyfriend was real tall and muscular and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, I don't think I can live up to that. And what if I let her down sexually and things of this nature, right? And so his soul wound, probably not going to surprise you, is I am a small man who will never measure up, right? And that shit wasn't developed like when he started dating women. That came from the ages between about 5 and 7 years old. Okay. I'm a small, worthless man who will never measure up. I think it was. I may not be getting that exactly right because it's been many years since I coached him. But because he has that unique wound, he just would always see other men or the woman that he wants to marry as like wanting other men, like the ex, or you know what I mean? Like, so he had to overcome that so that he could be confident. And so again, so circling all the way back to self-love, we use the pause protocol, and he got to this place where, yes, that wound is there. So it doesn't go away. We don't get rid of the ego. We don't get rid of the wound. It is there. It's there as a mechanism that if we turn around and look at it, if we come home to ourselves, then that discovery of our soul wound is the mechanism, not that keeps us in the protection mode and triggered mode and fighting mode or fight or flight mode. It actually brings us to our greatest power, our greatest truth, this unconditional self-love, this knowing that I am a beautiful, brilliant woman that people love to be with. Right. So that's the flip of mine.
So is that how you don't necessarily scratch that soul wound and remove the ego? Is because you then you flip something else, a new realization, a new perception of yourself. Like you said, I'm this amazing woman, is that how?
Yeah. So there's so there's the recognition that the ego fundamentally will always see itself as flawed. Okay, so if you want to think of it as there's a foundational belief that I am flawed because I am separate from God, okay? And so therefore I'm not good enough, just to put it in simple terms, right? That's what the ego perceives as the truth. It's a lie, but it's a necessary lie to live in this third dimensional physical world, right? Where we appear separate and solid.
Yeah.
Right. It's how this game of life is set up for us. So it's not about getting rid of that or healing that or overcoming that. It's about recognizing this is part of my humanity. And this is its specific operating system. So now that I know, I can be aware of when I get triggered. And then when I work with somebody, there's a 4-step process that we go from triggered to back to centered. And the 4th step is that truth statement. So if the lie, the soul wound is I'm an ugly, disgusting waste of time, we use the 4 steps and we get to the truth. And the 4th step is speaking your truth. I am. So it's a new I am statement, right? It's a declaration of self. And so in my case, the one that I've arrived at is a beautiful, brilliant woman that people love to be with. And so if that's the truth of who I am, then anything can show up. I can have lovers ghost me, right? I can have clients no show on a call. I can have these things happen in my reality that I don't then react with. Right? I don't get emotionally triggered. I don't feel ashamed or angry or these things. Again, nothing wrong with these human emotions, but understanding them and no longer being a victim to our own emotions is a place of empowerment, right? And the truth, right? The I am statement of truth, we could just boil it down to a single word. I am love. Right. And all of these the flashes, brilliant, beautiful, all of this can describe this physical being that I am. But again, strip it all the fuck away. And what's left? Peace, stillness, love. Right. So peace is that eternal quality of our being. It's the eternal quality of God, if you will. And then love is the activity of that essential being. So it is peace and it acts as love.
Yeah.
And that is who we all are.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
And so unless our spiritual pursuits or our personal development programs are getting us there, they're not getting us there. Mm-mm. So in other words, we're not fully realizing our power. Okay. And I don't use the word power like manipulation and control. I mean, like, oh, I am who I want to be, how I want to live, and all of these, like, creative, what I want to create. So that's the power, is to know who we really are. And that's where that self-love comes into play. So unless we're getting this about ourselves, what we're doing is falling short. Okay. And that's not a criticism. They don't often know because they're doing their work with the ego, with their soul wound, right? Trying to prove something to themselves or others, or trying to protect themselves from the apparent other or the world or some such thing. So most people are living in that paradigm of separation and then solving for it with spiritual pursuit, personal development work, and so on and so forth. Again, that's great. It's a step along the way, but it's not the ultimate realization. So I'm in the business of realizing who we ultimately are. And that's what metaphysics, that's the way that I approach the metaphysical coaching that I do.
Yeah, no, I love this. I mean, I believe that we are all one, but we are representation of. So I'll get an example from this book I'm reading, which is A Conversation with God, the third one.
Yeah,
the 3 books.
Neil Donald Walsh.
Yes. And the third book, there's this really good illustration that he makes when he speaks to God. I'm not going to explain the book. If you want to, I'll definitely recommend reading it. But anyway, so he talks about those lamps that we used to have, I believe, in the 80s and 90s, where there's like this blob inside, and then it gets activated when you turn on the light, because the heat gets the blob to move, and then it starts to go bigger, and then it starts to split into smaller blobs, and then it goes on like this, forever, like as long as the light is on.
The lava lamp? Are you talking about a lava lamp?
That's it. Yeah. The lava lamp. Yeah. Thank you. That's the one. Yeah. And so the blob divides, groups back together, but it's still the same blob to start off with. It's the same goo or whatever they put in there. And and I thought that was such a good illustration, because I believe we're all one. I believe, especially because when you feel energy, that is my proof in this perception of my life at the level. That's how I feel. Like, that's how I know that we are all one, but we're all obviously representation of different part of the one. And so in this book, when he was describing this, I was like, that is such a good way of describing it, because it may look like there's different blobs in that lava lamp. There may be 10 different little ones, and then all of a sudden they reunify again. Because I always felt like I've never been afraid of death, because I always felt like I'm going home. And that kind of almost, I feel like they explained it when they was doing the thing with the lava lamp. I mean, the book is brilliant. But you were talking about this man. You say that he's like, a small stature, and he felt, he felt less than because of it. And then you explain about his soul wound. And it's interesting because perception is everything. Because when you think, now I don't know how they feel internally, but for example, Danny DeVito and Kevin Hart, their confidence, or maybe they over compensate. Well, I don't know. I'm not to say, but because their energy is so they're full of. I mean, they're fun. They're really, really fun, and they're very funny, and they play on the fact that they are shorter statured. It actually makes them very sexy. And Danny DeVito, he's got a beer belly, he's got everything happening there. So, but he's very sexy. And he played next to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I thought he was the sexy one, and all these years ago when he played twins. So perception is a lot, says a lot of things. But when you talked about soul wound, I wonder if with it in your, how you define soul wound, the way I hear it, I feel like it's also like part of what we agreed with the things that we have to overcome in this life is part of like whatever you want to call it, the mission, purpose, contract, or whatever word would be the most appropriate. I don't know. But like, for example, if someone is like the fear of abandonment, and feeling like you are unlovable, all that kind of stuff, part of actually is that's the thing to overcome in this life. And that's probably where you're actually going to find the peace, because once those things are redefined in yourself to a cellular level or soul level, then you are not going to be triggered the same way anymore. You're not going to be triggered on that. And that also means that you would show up differently.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you have that wound, you will, I mean, I'll talk about myself, but I would act in a certain way that would basically just reaffirm. It become this confirmation circle, right? It's like, well, there you go. See, I knew, but it's me manifesting it, and picking the person who's going to teach me that lesson, help me teach that lesson to learn it. So everything is very much in our control, which is very much like a bittersweet pill to swallow sometimes, that every single decision that I made is what has got me here, right? Like a few years ago when I really made that realization, it was important for me, but it was also like, oof, got to make better decisions now. Need to do better now. So, like you said, the victim thing is definitely not a place to move as, and sometimes we don't realize it's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, no, and again, that's part of the setup. If we knew all of this, we'd all just be infinite beings living, peaceful, loving, static existence. But instead, we have this very dynamic existence for that purpose, right? If we look at why are we here, it's for the purpose of experiencing this infinite points of view and possibilities that is the infinite mind of God, to use that language, right? If we think of it, the quantum field is infinite and allness, but within that, those waves don't become particles without human observation, without the observation of consciousness upon it. So that's why we're here. We're here to collapse the possibilities into apparent physical form for the purpose of experiencing without the senses, without the ego, without these human apparatuses. I don't know if it's apparatusi. I don't know if that's a word. Fuck it. But without this, we wouldn't know, we being that infinite being. Okay. I'm not talking about individual human forms. I'm talking about our essence, our infinite eternal beingness wouldn't know this possibility that exists called the taste of coffee, or infinite being, which we all are. Like you said, we're all one. We're all aspects, apparent points of view of this infinite eternal beingness, energy field, infinite being. We wouldn't know the sensation of a lover's kiss on our lips.
Yeah.
So for the purpose of knowing and experiencing these phenomena, these infinite points of possibility, here we are. And to make this thing called us work, the ego apparatus is necessary. Because what is the ego? It sees or perceives separate, solid, slow to change. And then there's the aspect of the human emotions. So it's the human ego loves the feeling of happiness.
Yeah.
But it loathes the feeling of shame or embarrassment. Okay. And there's a whole scale of emotions. If anybody wants to look up the best teaching on our emotions, our states of consciousness and our emotions as human beings, Dr. David R. Hawkins, the book specifically is Power versus Force. If you want to look into that to understand your human emotions, that's what I would recommend to do that. But these human emotions, again, are like the ego. They're just part of our makeup. And because we're like attempting to attach ourselves to some called happiness and peace and love and joy, right? And avoid these other ones that we consider to be bad or negative, Like, that's just the ego doing its thing. It's putting some of our emotions in the good box and some of our emotions in the bad box. And so it's like anytime these emotions that are in the bad box get stimulated, what do? Fight or flight. Okay. Specifically based on our soul wound, which is also a part of our human makeup. It makes this game, this life that we are living in this physical world happen, possible.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's nothing that there's like nothing is even fucking wrong. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also why one person is triggering for you perhaps, but not triggering for me, or vice versa, right? It's because everything is kind of
Precisely.
neutral. It's just how you perceive it. And
Perceive
obviously
it.
not talking about if someone's coming at you with a machete and, like
Correct.
that's, like there is like, we may not want to go there, right? But it's like, that will feel really bad. But it's, but like in terms of like, regular everyday thing, it truly is like, well, oh, why did that not piss you off? That pissed me off. Like, and but it's again, it's about this like experiencing. So maybe the ego, even though it may put things in good and bad box, like you say, it's to do with like experiencing things, right?
That's right.
To have that, it's not just all going to be love and light, we have to experience.
We need the contrast.
We need the contrast.
We need the contrast to actually experience this infinite realm of possibility that we live in.
Yeah.
Right. We need the contrast, but
we do.
But we've judged some of that experience as bad. So we try to avoid it. We fight like hell not to feel it, or we accuse others of making us feel it. And that's just, I mean, girl, a hamster in a wheel ain't getting nowhere with this kind of thing,
Yeah.
And so if we can understand ourselves, then again, we put the power back where it belongs, which is within us. And by power, I mean our ability to respond and to create that which we desire, rather than being a victim to circumstances, other people's opinions, and so on and so forth. Right. So when we're in our power, this is where true self-love exists. And without this knowing, without this experience and understanding of our soul wound and how it works and how it has sort of shaped our experience, especially in relationship and with money and with our bodies. Without knowing this, then all of these self-love practices that, are highly commercialized and are wonderful for relaxation, but we're not actually loving ourselves. We're just not disliking our apparent self. We're as much.
We're distracting ourselves.
We're distracting ourselves. Yeah. We're it's like a Band-Aid on a fundamental, like a wound, right? Yeah. It's just like, oh, self-love, just take a bath, which I love baths, but that's not self-love. that's relaxation. Okay. And again, these are useful for calming some of that chaos. But if we're talking about true unconditional self-love, so we can show up in the world confident, clear, with a level of clarity of who we are, what we're available for, what we're not available for, and how to, like you said, navigate that circumstance with grace and confidence and have a positive outcome for all people involved. That's the kind of thing that I'm interested in. That's how I enjoy living my life. And that's what the people that I work with want that for themselves too. Because sometimes, yes, it is a relational, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever the case may be, that there's something that they just cannot get over. Other times it's a parent and a child. And other times it's a boss and their entire company, or their business partners, or some such thing. But it's this, people usually come to me when they've done a lot of work, therapy or coaching, or a lot of plant medicines and things of this nature, to sort of get over that fundamental challenge they just cannot find a solution for, a satisfying solution for. And then they're kind of like hands in the air, like, I just can't figure this shit out. With all the help that I've gotten, I still am getting triggered by this thing. And it's because they haven't yet discovered their soul wound. So the soul wound is in the driver's seat, causing that reaction, causing that problem. And my position is, it's because it's time to discover your divinity. Okay. When you're at this point of it, like this pestering thing has become a crisis or something unsolvable, apparently unsolvable, it's because this part of you, this soul, your infinite, eternal, peaceful, loving soul really wants you to know who you are. And so that challenge appears to not be overcomable because you don't get over it with your ego. You actually have to discover your divinity. You cannot dwell in that Newtonian, physical, separate, solid, slow to change place. You actually have to get to the truth of who you are. And then that problem is solved.
It's funny. Did you just see what AI did?
I
Zoom.
did. I saw
And
that.
for
The
those who are
thumbs up.
listening, basically just the last two sentences that Colette just said, there was like a bubble that came out, like a thought bubble with like a thumbs up. And I was like, that's like, I didn't even know that was on in the Zoom. I was like, it's just so weird that they do that.
It's a new feature in Zoom.
But
Yeah.
AI agrees. So there was that. Just want to ask, I mean, so how does one begin to find that soul wound? Because I mean, it's not something, you're not going in with like a scalpel and opening someone up and look into their heart and past their heart and find the button that says soul or something, it's like, how do you, is it to do with like finding the patterns, like you ask someone the patterns in their life and then you kind of start to see what's happening, or what's the...
Yeah. I mean, I've developed a diagnostic process to get, and it's just the facts, right? So we don't do psychoanalyzing. This isn't about dredging up the past. And in fact, that's just like satisfying the ego, right? It's just reaffirming the victim to a circumstance. So I don't do that with my clients. So I've had to develop a diagnostic process to get to what each person's unique, specific, and cruel soul wound is. And it's a single statement. And when we discover that, and you ask, how do we do that? Well, as far as I know, I'm the only person on the planet that does this. And I'm hoping to change that. In other words, my biggest vision is to get this technology, if you will, this protocol out into the world, into the hands of leaders, but, average Joe as well. Those who want to understand this. That's the other thing, Angie. This is not something I'm going to force feed or convince people of, or like that. It actually doesn't work. The ego will dig its heels in and two middle fingers in the air to me and like condemn me for even bringing this to the surface. The thing about this is you have to have that urge within you to solve this unsolvable problem that you're faced with. You actually have to be at a stage of your life and your journey, or we'll call it your conscious, your conscious evolution, if you will. You have to be at a certain stage so that you can receive and participate in the conversation that, with the pause protocol. So, so it's out into the hands of those people at that stage of their journey. That's my goal, is to get this out into the world, and the cool thing is like, you can continue down the path that you're on with your spirit. Like, this doesn't alter your spiritual beliefs. It will enhance what you already are up to, personal development, spiritual pursuits, whatever it is. Like, this is an enhancement, a technology that enhances what you're already doing. It doesn't have to send you on you don't have to change your beliefs. In other words, the only thing it changes is you knowing who you are.
Yeah. So you mentioned there was 4 steps. So the first one would be, like you said, like finding out where your soul wound is. The last one is
so hang on a sec. So there's a diagnostic conversation that takes place, right? That's diagnosing your soul wound. So once you know that, then you can undertake the 4 steps. And the 4 steps are, when you get triggered, and it could be something serious like your boyfriend breaks up with you, or it could be something completely mild like traffic and you're late for an appointment that you really need to be at, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the situation is. You can use these 4 steps to go from triggered, right? Like activated, provoked, to centered, back in a state of grace and a state of, I'm okay. It's okay. It's all good. Okay. And so the 4 steps then, if you want to take notes, if you're listening, the first step, and again, this only works once you know your soul wound. Okay. So I'm going to say that. The first step is see it for what it is. The situation is not the issue, whatever it is, traffic, the breakup, whatever, your tumor. The situation is not the issue. Your soul wound is. Okay. If you didn't have the specific, unique soul wound that you do, you wouldn't necessarily have the reaction to the situation that you're having. Okay. So when we can see that the situation is not provoking me, it's my soul wound that's being provoked, then we take our attention off the situation, off the other person that we might feel victim to. Okay. We take our attention off of that and we place it on ourselves. So we take our power back is one way to say that, right? So we now have the power. Oh, this is emanating from me because of my soul wound. Okay. Now I know what to quote unquote work on. My soul wound. My soul wound is calling me, calling for my attention. What it's actually calling for is your love. Okay. So step 1, see it for what it is. Step 2, feel the feelings. Okay, so this is why I wrote a book on emotional mastery. And it's such a big part of the work that I do is understanding our emotions, especially for empathic individuals and, again, highly perceptive or highly sensitive people.
Yeah.
We must understand our emotions so that we are not victim to them. Okay.
Yeah.
So step 2 is feel the feelings. And there's a whole process that I'm not going to get into here because it's experiential. Like, in other words, we don't go through these 4 steps when I'm taking a client through them or myself. I use my protocol on myself. It's how I developed it, out of necessity for my own well-being. But we don't go through these 4 steps mentally. In other words, they don't work as long as we're in the level of our ego. It doesn't. This is not an ego gratification thing.
Yeah.
That's precisely right. We have to get beyond, which is why metaphysics, that's what I do as a metaphysicist. I get in your metaphysical, the oneness, the energy field, if you will. Which again is why what I do only works with people who want it, because I have to be invited into that level with them.
For sure.
Yeah. So step 2 is feel the feelings. And it's one feeling at a time. And what happens when we allow ourselves to feel an uncomfortable feeling like shame, for example, is when we're no longer resisting it, we're no longer fighting it, we're no longer judging it, and we sort of surrender to it. We actually surrender to it. We let it be what it is. And we no longer are trying to fix it, get around it, make it go away, any of that. Then it just, because it is energy, it just dissipates and it sort of moves on through. Okay. So then we find
on that point, feel the feelings is huge. I had to go through a whole protocol. Something when I was having a lot of anxiety to do with a boyfriend I had. And it may be a different to what to what you do, but I remember it's I learned to I had to as soon as I was home, if I was still feeling to actually there was a whole thing, and I'm not going to say exactly what I did because you have to be in safe hands and you have to be able to speak to someone about it, because it got quite dark, but it was almost it was like a purge, and it was it was not dangerous, there was a whole system in place, but it was almost it reminded me of this, because when you said about when you resist and you avoid and stuff like that, it's not going away. But it's when you feel through it, it's almost to me, it made me think of, it's that's how you build your immune system, right? It's you are exposed to germ. You're not avoiding. You don't live in a bubble. You let the child go out and eat what's on the floor, and all this kind of stuff that kids do and babies do. Because you build your immune system. And I feel that's the same with the feelings. You can't, it's not all love and light. You have to go into those feelings. And it was so helpful. It took I had to do a few times. And it was really, really helpful, because it was anxiety that it was physically painful. My stomach was like this. It was it was great for
and you
detox.
have to allow that.
It was great for detox, but man, it was energy zap, it was sorry. So that was the second
you're precisely
step.
Right. Yeah. And so even doing this on myself, there have been times where the shame was so intense that I physically threw up.
Yeah.
Right. As I was letting myself feel that feeling that I had for I don't know, decades been avoiding, suppressing, making it wrong. You know what I mean? And so once I finally allowed it, it came up and out, literally.
Yeah.
And so
I'm
it's
not
not
surprised.
pretty, but I mean, that's part of this protocol, is to feel that feeling. And like you said, in a safe, uh, environment, like with a trained, if you're not versed in doing this yourself yet, which that is actually my goal, is to get my clients able to do this for themselves and not become dependent on me or anyone else for that matter. But to work through that in a safe environment is paramount. So then step 3, moving right along. Step 3 is once we've come out of that, once we've surrendered, we're no longer resisting, we're in a place of acceptance of that previously unacceptable emotion. Then step 3 is give yourself grace. Okay. And this is, again, something that is experienced. It's not a thought that we think, I love myself. Like, we can do that, but the ego's whispering, yeah, right, fucker. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, it won't let us truly believe that.
Yeah.
So, and you can't do step 3, give yourself grace, without having done step 2, feel the feelings, because then there's still something in us that we're rejecting and denying. So once we surrender that, then that love, that unconditional love, for that part of ourselves that we had considered absolutely unlovable, it's a natural, like, it's sort of like your higher self and the version of you from, I don't know, that got broken up with, right? Or that was a bitch to your mom or something, right? That unlovable version of you, you then give grace or unconditional love to. So it's between you and you. And something incredibly magical happens right there. Like, people just come alive, tears, like life, stuff that they had been denying, like the love that they had been denying themselves for their entire fucking lives. All of a sudden they feel. Something incredible happens there, again, because this is not at the level of ego, it's beyond that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because when you said that, I felt like small tears coming up for me. Like, I can imagine.
Yeah. And that's the thing. This is, people are like, well, I love and forgive my dad. And I'm like, yeah, that's beautiful, but that's not what this is. It's you, and it's the love that you and only you can give yourself. Okay. So like forgiving dad or loving someone or realizing they actually loved you or some such thing. That's a beautiful thing, but that's not what this protocol is. This is a you thing. You, the deeper you, and the the shallow or surface you, the ego you, right? It's the two sort of becoming one, if you will, in love. And then so step 4, and again, each of these steps can't be done without the prior one. That's just again, when I developed this spiritual technology, that's just how it was revealed to me. And it's, girl, before I get to step 4, I'll just tell you this. You asked what I've been doing these last 4 years. Well, it's distilling and refining this process, again, with science, in a scientific, as process, right? But field testing it. Like, I've had some serious, significant life challenges in the big 3: health, finances, and relational. Like, I've gotten to field test, not that I hadn't before, but boy, oh boy, did I really get to field test this technology.
In the last 4 years alone? All 3?
In the last 3, in the last 3 years. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into it here, but probably worse than you could imagine. I was able to use this protocol and maintain a sense of groundedness in absolute uncertainty, like not having a home kind of certainty, and uncertainty. And my friends are like, I don't know how you're not going fucking bananas or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I am pretty surprised by that too. But it's because of this protocol that, that I can face these challenges clear-headed, not emotionally chaotic, right? I can face these challenges with a clear head and a knowing that they will work themselves out.
Yeah.
Right. and not be a victim to my circumstances.
That's when it matters. Not when you
Yeah.
not when they run out of oat milk in the coffee shop, you know.
Yeah.
It's like that will get over. But like
Yeah.
but that's when all this work, you know, whatever you're doing, whatever it is that you do for your own healing and things like that. That's when it really starts to take shape, because that's when you get into really, you know, real
Yeah.
hardships and difficult
Yeah.
situations, you know,
Yes.
that's when that shows itself. What do you do
Yes.
next, you know?
Yes. Precisely. You're spot on. Yeah. Yeah. So step 4 is speak the truth, right? So if the lie, again, the soul wound is an I am statement, an ugly, disgusting waste of time in my case, then step 4 is speaking the truth. I am, and it's always that I am declaration, loved, right? And so here's the thing about step 4. This is not an empty affirmation, like whatever Stuart Smalley looking himself in the mirror in Saturday Night Live saying, "You're beautiful, I love you, you know what I mean?" It's not that. We're not trying to convince the ego of something that the ego fundamentally cannot believe. We're actually speaking a truth that resonates. Like it's a whole body. Hell yes, I am. There is no debate. There is no wavering when we speak these words, right? They feel like the truth. And so it may not, many times when I'm working with a client, they actually can't say the words I am loved without having a wobble and being like, that didn't, like, that felt like me saying something to convince myself. And I go, okay, good. Then we're going to find what is the truth. What is the truth that you can speak right here, right now? It might not quite be a beautiful, brilliant, you know, it might not be this full long sentence, but and they go, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. And that for them is the full truth in that moment. Okay. And then the more they use these 4 steps, because listen, life is going to fucking trigger you.
Yeah.
And if you use the 4 steps, you go from the lie to the truth. You go from the deception to the enlightenment.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yourself.
the point of this is not to gaslight ourselves and say, I am loved, if I'm not believing it. Like that would be
That's
the
right.
opposite, right? We're not trying to deceive ourselves. So if that's where they're at, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then
Yeah.
you build, right? You
Yeah.
build your immune system to
Yes.
that too, right? That too. Yes.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, Colette, first of all, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed listening to you. Yeah, I really felt this. I really love it. And I another gazillion questions for you, but that will be for another time.
Okay.
But I want to ask you the same finishing thoughts that I ask every one of my guests. And it'll be interesting to see if it's different from last time. I don't remember what it was last time, but I can go back and find it if you like after this. What life lesson do you wish you'd learned sooner?
I wish I'd learned who I am at a younger age so that I could live from the truth of who I am, so that I could live from love, so I could live from genuine confidence and knowing, not just about myself, but about others as well. I feel like that's the most powerful form of knowledge that we as human beings can actually experience. That allows us to live a life of harmony. So I wish I would have known this at a younger age, to have more years knowing, more years joyful, more years grounded, even in vast uncertainty.
Yeah. But that's what I mean, that is what this part of the challenge I feel in this world, right? Is that then, and again, I think there's obviously a reason for all of this, but you know how, you know, like the beauty industry, Hollywood, all of that, they prey on that. They prey on us not knowing who we are, not feeling good enough, all of that stuff. I mean, it's very profitable.
Yes.
You know, because then we go out and we try and modify ourselves. We butcher our own body, we apply stuff on our body, we inject things in our body. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And then never mind, you know, what they tell us, how to have sex, how many to have sex with, all of this stuff. And it's continuous. It seems like it's positive and acceptance, but actually it's taking away from, well, what do you want? Who are you? And
Yeah.
then we would
Yeah.
decide from there. We don't need to be told what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But
Yeah.
that's part of the society and the game in a way. Maybe it's not
Hmm.
the right word, but yeah, the place that we're in.
Hmm.
So I think that is probably the biggest threat
Mm.
to
Yeah.
those, if you were to choose that word.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. And the thing, I'll just make a little note about that. The thing about, the beauty industry and the, modifications, injections and fillers and stuff like that. So I say do whatever you enjoy, but don't do it because your soul wound thinks you're an ugly, disgusting waste of time, for example.
Yeah.
Do it because it's an expression. And that's what's lacking. People are not expressing themselves. They're saying that they are, but they're actually, it's the soul wound, it's the ego that is instigating that. So when we know ourselves, as our essential selves, right? Our infinite eternal beingness that is love, then it's the simple, gosh, I forget who said this. So but it's not my quote. It's love and do whatever you want. So love yourself and then do whatever you want, because it's not coming from a place of proving or trying to get something from somebody by making changes to yourself.
Yeah, because I think a lot of what I perceive anyway is that there's a portion, not all, but there's a pretty big portion where I feel like it comes from a place of wanting to be accepted, still being relevant. And I understand it because I'm having my own difficulties about aging, right? So I'm 45, I'm going to be 46 in November. Do I enjoy the wisdom that comes with the years? Yeah, sure. But do I also want to stay plump and everything staying upwards, before gravity takes hold? Like, yeah, of course. So I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I can see how it can be a slippery slope if it's coming from a place of this validation that you need, right? Whereas if it's
Mm-hmm.
like, actually, that's what I fancy, or if it doesn't come from a soul wound, it's very
Mm-hmm.
different. But it's very hard to discern if
Yes.
you don't really know the answers to certain questions yourself. So
Yes.
yeah. And so the second question I ask all my guests is, what do you not put up with anymore?
Self-criticism. Yeah. And because I don't tolerate my own self-criticism, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not criticized by others.
Yeah.
And and it may happen. I don't perceive it. It doesn't enter my reality, so to speak. Or if it does, and I do happen to notice it, I effortlessly go, like, it doesn't bother me. And not one iota does it affect me. And that girl is like a whole nother world for me.
Yeah.
Because I used to really care about other people's opinions, especially as an empath, right? We're navigating other people's emotions and how they're responding, and so that we can feel safe. Well, and then there comes that whole victim thing, right? Other people have control, other people have power over me. Well, not anymore. Not anymore, because I no longer am perceiving myself as a victim. I'm no longer criticizing my not good enoughness, not pretty enoughness, not smart enoughness, not responsible enoughness, not anything, right? That I previously had, prior to knowing what my soul wound is. And like I said, developing this protocol to not be a victim to it.
Yeah. So it's not worrying about other people's opinion. That's huge. Yeah.
Girl, it's freedom.
Yeah. Which is very
Freedom.
different to, which I hear being different to, let's say, if you were looking for some help for something, like you're like, you know what, this bit here is not working in my life. How can I do it? And you may get help from someone else.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Whereas if
Oh,
someone has
yeah.
an opinion of you, like, it doesn't matter what they think of you, because to be fair, we can't please everybody. So it's a lot of work trying to stay vanilla,
Yeah.
to stay in the
Yeah.
middle of, like, to not offend anyone is that's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before you tell us where we can find you and how we can work with you, is there anything that you'd like to share with us that I may not have asked you? I may have interrupted you. Like, I want to give you the opportunity if there was anything you wanted to say before you plug all your stuff.
Yeah, this was a very comprehensive conversation. So thank you for being such an excellent host and guiding us. If there was anything left unsaid, it would simply be that um, sooner or later, doesn't matter when, doesn't matter how, sooner or later, we're all going to know our infinite, eternal nature, our divinity, as I call it. But why wait until you fucking die?
Yeah, we're definitely gonna find out then. That's for
You
sure.
know,
Yeah.
why not know while you're alive in a body, and then experience this world, your body, other people, just experience it from that knowing, from that liberated self.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world when we do.
Yeah. It does sound really good. I'm going to talk to you after anyway. And can you tell us, Colette, where can we find you? How can we work with you? Give us all the good stuff.
Yeah, you bet. The best way is probably to go to my website, ColetteDavenport.com. Or you can look me up on social media. I drop little nuggets of wisdom when I channel divine wisdom. Sometimes it's just for me, but other times I will share like Facebook posts or Instagram posts. So if you want to kind of get more into this metaphysical space with me, like that would be a good place to go check it all out. But yeah, I am inviting people who feel that sort of urge, like, oh yes, I would love to overcome this lifelong pattern of self-criticism. And all of my spiritual yoga ain't cutting it, right? Like if you're there, then my invitation is to reach out. Let's at least have a conversation to see if, in fact, what I do can serve you.
And is it ColetteDavenport.com?
Yes. ColetteDavenport.com. It's spelled ColetteDavenport. One L, two T's, and an E at the end.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Colette. Thank you. Honestly, I'm glad we got to do this. I'm really glad that you came back on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angie.
And that's our episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. It can be a screenshot that you text them, a link, the name of it, any of those will do. If you give a 5-star rating and a review, that really, really helps the algorithm for it to be shared on all the different platforms. And just a little note, please be aware that this podcast is always free to listen to. Any platforms that want to charge you for it are doing so without my consent, okay? This is free. You can listen to it on Apple, Spotify, all of the other regular listening platforms that don't charge you. This is free. So don't let someone charge you to listen to my podcast. Until next time.
Using health inappropriately.